Nakamura against Anand. A theoretical discussion in an opening that until very recently was considered to be a very, very dubious line. So I'm not quite sure if Vishy Anand has done his homework here. But it certainly looks like it, and you can normally bet on Vishy knowing such stuff. C takes d4, knight takes d4, e5, knight takes c6, b takes c6, c4, bishop e6, bishop g5, knight... Rook to c8 is the line on the board, and Nakamura has to decide how to make sense of his extra tempo. This would be a theoretical position with black to move, a move like bishop e7 or queen to e7. Looks possible, and I guess I finally have viewers so I can relax and focus on what's going on. Beautiful. Rook c8, Nakamura in deep thought here. My guess is that Nakamura was of the conventional school of thinking that this line is just supposed to be black. Bad for black. Black cannot play like that. The extra tempo is too significant, but strong computers recently have said, you know what, you can do this bishop e6, rook c8. It's not too bad, and black can employ this line. Vishy Anand always on top of such developments. Very hard worker on chess, of course. Has managed to surprise Hikaru Nakamura, who will be looking to win this game, to catch up Vishy with Vishy in the standings, or overtake him should he win. Nakamura traditionally has a very good score against Vishy Anand, up 6-1 in classical games. Bishop g5, rook c8. He now, however, will have to find his way over the board against a well-prepared Vishy. Queen a4 is another very typical move, threatening c takes d5, when black would answer with queen to d7, and white once again has a choice between rook d1, knight c3, e3, bishop takes f6. Many options, but nothing that directly does any damage. Let's look at what other games we got. We got Vladimir Kramnik against Anish Giri. Another slow, symmetrical Grunfeld. The opening I would have expected Vishy to play. Knight f3, d5, g3, g6 appeared in that one. That's what Vishy used in his World Championship match against Magnus Carlsen. And Giri has adopted that line. Bishop g2, bishop g7. The point of black's move order is if white now castles, black goes e5, occupying the center. While if white goes d4, then black has a choice between knight f6 or the move played in the game, the move c6. c6 directed against c4, which can now be captured. Therefore, Kramnik, who has a wealth of experience in this variation, starts with short castles, knight to f6, and plays the quiet setup with b3. Arguing in b3 systems, maybe the pawn is not ideal on c6, even though putting your pawn here and bishop f5 is a well-established setup for black here as well. c4, a5, this move might look a little strange at first sight, and it's not forced. Moves like knight bd7 or knight to e4 have also appeared in practice, but a5 is a pretty typical move, trying to disrupt the white setup a little bit. Often white in these lines wants to put his knight on d2, but if you go knight bd2 here, then this pawn keeps pushing itself up the board by going a4, not worried about sacrificing his life temporarily for the greater good after ba queen a5. Therefore a5 more or less forces white to go knight c3, not knight bd2, and after knight c3, Giri's idea is to go knight e4, immediately challenge that knight, and once it's exchanged to then go a4. Knight e4, c takes d5, knight takes c3, all of this has been played pretty quickly. Bishop takes c3, c takes d5, knight to e5, and we have a typical, for this line, sort of symmetrical structure after some opening subtleties being exchanged. White is probably a tad better. Now you could argue the pawn on a5 for this structure doesn't make that much sense, but black is very, very solid, and because of the pawn structure, it's hard to achieve anything but the tiniest of advantages here, if at all. Giri plays knight to c6, challenging that dude. Kramnik plays queen d2, keeping an eye on the a5 pawn, and Giri pushes it up the board with a5 to a4. When Kramnik decides to alter the structure, goes knight takes c6, b takes c6, and b4. You need a PhD in symmetrical Grunfeld / exchange Slav positions to appreciate the subtleties here, but b4 is really the only way to play for a win if You allow a takes b3, there's just nothing to talk about, the position is equal, and Kramnik doesn't want that, therefore he keeps some tension in the position, goes b4. White would like to go a3 as well, but Black could stop that if he is so inclined by going a4 to a3. And that creates a very double-edged pawn structure, where frankly I'm not 100% sure who's better and why. We will, however, find out. There we see Hikaru Nakamura thinking, can Anand really get away with what he's doing? Playing the Grunfeld a tempo down? That's not supposed to be good. You have this massive center and you have to cover it all. But it is not a bad line as indicated by our friends the engine. Or multiple engines. And it looks like Nakamura has not studied this. Therefore he's gonna have to find his way here. Many options. Queen a4 is the move you would normally blitz out, threatening cd, but then after queen d7 you still need a way to play. In the analogous position with colors reversed, something like e3 is sometimes tried, but you can't do this with the bishop still stuck on g5, because after knight e4 all of a sudden this would be gone. So if you want to do this e3 idea, you would have to take here, then play e3, rook d1, but is this really playing for an advantage? I'm not 100% sure. I trust Vichy's opening. And even though I'm trying very hard to pretend that there is not a Berlin going on in this round, that's not the truth. In the Shirov against Aronian game, we do have a Berlin mainline discussion. And I'm still not much wiser about the Berlin than any other day, but I will try to talk you through it. Nevertheless, knight takes e4, the Berlin mainline. Recently we've seen lots of rook e1s, knight f6 here, knight e5, bishop e7. But Shirov is old school, he goes for the endgame. He does believe that the weakened black pawn structure does matter here. And Shirov is also one of the best endgame players in the business, so this is certainly going to be an interesting game. He's done the same thing in the first round against Vladimir Kramnik, didn't get anywhere. Let's see which line Levon Aronian chooses. d5, knight f5, takes, knight c3, bishop to e7. That's one reason why nowadays they tend to start with h3 and not knight to c3. One difference is if Black chooses this line with bishop e7, nowadays they go g4, knight to h4, and here in many lines you can do something like, or not in many lines, in this very line, going knight to d2 and putting this knight on f3. That's why, if you check modern Grandmaster games, pretty much everybody has switched to starting with h3 and then going knight c3 next move. Shirov sticks to this move order and Aronian tries to punish him for it by going for this move bishop e7, which they don't do much after h3. And now Shirov plays h3, we see the black idea to play knight to h4, and this knight cannot reach the king side so easily to support his colleague there. Still, of course, that doesn't mean that white is in trouble or anything, it's just a line that has gone a little bit out of fashion. Rook d1 check, king to e8, this is typically forced after rook d1. If bishop d7, you're probably running into some trouble like knight to g5, attacking this pawn, and if it's covered by, let's say, rook f8, e6 would be winning because of the pin. So king e8 is forced, knight to d4. Shirov doesn't want to exchange these knights, instead keeps it central, goes knight d4. Here, if I'm not mistaken, the theoretical main line is knight f5, and some games have ended in a draw after knight f3, knight h4, and so on. But Aronian decides to play knight g6, another typical square for this knight in the Berlin. We've seen Kramnik put his knight there as well against Shirov. And after f4 to play h5, impeding the advance of these pawns with g4. Knight to e4, h4, once again fixing the structure on the king side. And a typical follow-up would be rook h5 fighting against f5 pushes. I'm sure all of this has been seen in many a game. Bishop e3, a6 might look like a weird move, but the point is black wants to go c5, and if you start with c5, you run into knight b5. c7 is hanging, so that's not a great idea. But with a6, you control that b5 square and are now ready to push c5, should you feel the need. Some more moves haven't played. a6, c4, rook h5. I have a feeling I've seen all this before, but you can check it out if you want to check the database of your liking. There is one on Chess24. Find some references. All of this looks very, very familiar to me. Maybe even Shirov himself at a game there. Rook d3, f6, takes, Interesting decision by Aronian to go f6, undermine this e5 pawn, and yeah, create some weaknesses in his own position, but also getting rid of the white space advantage. And now black could very well get all his pieces out comfortably and get a good position if white does not manage to come up with anything direct. Let's say king f7, bishop d7, rook to f8. Well, rook f8 looks a bit ridiculous. Rook to d8. If black achieves all that, he's going to be in good shape, and Shirov is going to have to find a way to keep black busy before that happens. So I think complex position, both sides are going to be happy. I believe Aronian solved his opening problems, but can you ever really tell in the Berlin, are there even opening problems, or are they just playing a complex queenless middle games and whoever understands it better comes out on top? I'm not sure. We're going to go to our game of the round. The two co-leaders, and Nakamura has probably been watching the show, even though it started with a bit of delay. He's gone for bishop takes f6, g takes f6, and e3. The point of e3 is that you want to go knight c3 or rook d1, but if you start with either of those, then black can push d4, attacking here. Well, after e3, let's say black makes a development move like bishop e7, then this pawn is sort of fixed, and here bad things could happen to it. For example, cd takes, king has to take, rook to d1, and now d4 is no longer a great move because of e takes d4. So it is important to take that square under control, and we'll see how Vichy reacts. In fact, he already has reacted. He's played d4 instantly without wasting any time. Now he wants to go c5 and support this pass pawn. I believe Vichy has analyzed all this and is probably still in book, even though he spent around 10 minutes, so maybe he's been trying to recall his analysis. But if you go for this line, you have done your homework, because it's a very sharp and very committal choice. And especially given the tournament situation, I don't think Vichy would choose this if he felt a little unsure about it. E takes d4, e takes d4. I've been thinking about c5, just trying to stop black from going c5 himself. Could very well be an idea. I'm not sure, maybe you can just take it and nothing is happening, but I kind of like the look of it. And if bishop takes c5, who knows, rook c1, bad things could very well happen along the c file. This bishop can't move, because then you take on c6 with the bishop, and if you have to go queen e7, at the very least white can take here. Maybe he doesn't have to immediately, maybe he can continue developing. So this looks like an interesting idea to me, to go c5 just before black manages to go c5. Because if you play a normal move, let's say knight d2, then after c5 I believe black is perfectly fine. So I would not be surprised if Nakamura tried that, just defending against the main plan that Vichy has at his disposal. Yeah, he's played c5 indeed. And this is going to get very, very interesting. I like this move. And I'm not sure black has anything better than the line I was talking about. Bishop takes, rook c1, queen e7. If white takes the pawn on c6, black goes king f8. And I think black is probably okay. The king is not doing too badly here. But maybe white can delay it, go knight d2, hinting at ideas like knight b3 or knight e4. I don't know, very, very sharp position, which is probably more in Nakamura's interest than in Vichy's given the tournament situation. He managed to spice it up. It's not a rocky, solid position for black, but of course Vichy has been in very good shape in the first 3 games, and if he is in shape, he can calculate with anybody in the world, and that very much includes Hikaru Nakamura. Vichy took on c5 after some consideration. Now the ball is back in Nakamura's court. Rook c1 looks like the obvious move. You could also start with knight d2, but I don't think you want to allow black to move this bishop away and to prepare the push c5. So I would guess he's going to go rook c1. Yeah, he's already done it. And looks to me like black only has one good move, which is queen to e7. This bishop can't move because the bishop takes c6, winning the exchange. And if you go queen d6, then you're really asking for trouble after knight d2, which threatens a knight fork from the middle of the board with knight to e4. So that's not the greatest idea in the world. And I believe he's going to play queen to e4. Welcome back, guys, to round number 4 of the Zurich Chess Challenge, where the big game of the round is the game between Hikaru Nakamura and Vishy Anand, which has heated up considerably after e takes d4, e takes d4, c5, bishop takes c5, rook c1, queen e7, all forced, bishop takes c6 check. Nakamura decided to grab the pawn immediately, not go for development first. King to f8. The position looks very unclear. Black has the 2 bishops. He has a slightly shattered pawn structure consisting of 6 isolated pawns, but he also has a lot of space. His king is not going to be so bad on g7. A lot of activity. So I don't think that black is worse here, actually. But it is a position where anything can happen, very non-standard, and it's going to be very interesting to see what's going on. Knight to d2 has been played by Nakamura, connecting his rooks and, of course, bringing his knight into the game. Bit to e4, f3, b3. This knight has lots of potential destinations. King to g7, Anand also finishes development, connects his rooks, and after king g7, queen to b5. This bishop has to decide where it wants to go. Bishop b6 looks obvious, and it has already been played. Nakamura decided to drop back with his queen to d3. I have a feeling that Anand is doing very well here. There's no way you can really get to this king. Like, think of a way to attack it. I cannot figure one out. And the black pieces are just very well placed. I'm not sure what you do. Rook c7 intending rook to c8 looks like a very plausible plan. But there's also other options. You could even be more aggressive by playing h5 followed by h4. And I'm sorry, I miscounted. I said 6 isolated pawns and I'm being corrected. It's only 5. Congratulations for finding that out. You are absolutely correct. And maybe you could go h5, intending h4 to get rid of one of these 5 isolated pawns and start a bit of an attack. I do think that there is very, very decent chances here for Vishy Anand. His pawn structure actually guards his king reasonably well. And I think he's won the opening battle, which he's done a lot, but he's, especially against Nakamura, he's ended up in trouble more than one time, actually many, many times. And therefore, he's gonna be a little anxious if Nakamura manages to ask some tricky questions which he cannot answer yet again. Nakamura's defeated Anand 6 times in classical games, only lost 1 game. And there we see Nakamura studying the ceiling. He's probably, I don't know if he's unhappy. I think he's very good, especially nowadays, at not getting too unhappy or too happy about his position. Never get too high, never get too low. He's just trying to make the next move. And maybe he's also trying to do this genius thing like Shirov likes to do, to stare at the ceiling, to make you look smarter. This guy doesn't need the board, he can look away from it, but normally it just means that players are really concentrating or trying to recall something. I once read up on this, but I always forget. I think if you're looking to your upper left, it is memory. Your upper right is imagination or something. But I honestly can't remember a thing. Anyway, Anand has a decent position out of the opening, and he's now taking some time trying to find a plan. h5, intending h4 is the most aggressive way to play. Developing his rook either to d8 or after rook c7 to c8 looks sensible to me as well. We're gonna go to Kramnik against Giri, which is another interesting game. c4, a5, knight c3, knight e4. We've seen all that, and frankly, I'm not sure if it's that interesting. But it had a strange structure here after takes b4. I think Giri should have gone a3, just fixing these pawns before white gets a chance to play a3 himself. Instead, he went for an improvement of that bishop, which already looked developed on f5, but it's not doing very much on this diagonal. So Giri thought, you know what, I'll go back home and I'll try to put this bishop on b5 or on c4, where it can hold together my queenside. It's a bit of a slow plan though, and Kramnik decides to strike in the center while the iron is hot, or while the bishop is home on c8, e4, bishop to a6, rook f to e1. And after d takes e4, bishop takes e4, bishop b5, both sides have achieved what they've planned for. Geary has managed to put his bishop here. Might look like a bit of a big pawn on b5, fitting into the pawn chain. But bad bishops defend good pawns, as they say, and this bishop even has a clear view along this diagonal. So I think it's going to be reasonably happy there. Kramnik has activated his bishop. And after rook a to c1, let's say e6 or queen to d7. Geary played e6. I believe the position is more or less equal. a3, queen to d6, bishop b2, rook f d8. Both sides have weaknesses. White the d4 pawn, black the c6 pawn. They should cancel each other out. Rook c8 defending c6, rook c5, queen b8 getting out of the way. I believe it's just an equal position. Rook dc1, ganging up on this Mr. c6, but Geary could just defend it with, let's say, queen b7. And the problem is white doesn't have that much freedom of movement without dropping his d4 pawn. So, equal position here. In Shirov-Aronian, we have a position that might not be equal anymore. I was earlier praising Levon Aronian's treatment of the Berlin, even though I didn't really understand what's going on, but I said I can't see a plan for white to stop black from concluding his development. Shirov came up with rook to f1, hinting at f5, but that also gives up the juicy e5 square. Bishop to d7, f5, knight to e5, rook to c3, and king to f7. And this position looks nice for black. He has the two bishops. He's almost done developing. He can put his rook to g8. He has this nice square for the knight on e5. And white has not really managed to create any breach in the black position. Not sure if that was English, but you get what I'm saying. White really hasn't found a lot of targets. Shirov tries bishop f4 to get rid of this knight. Aronian goes rook d8, not rook g8, likes his rook better on the d file. Shirov took, bishop takes, f takes, and knight to f3. But now the two bishops might really start doing the business here. After bishop takes f5, knight takes e5 check, for example, king to e6. First of all, both knights are hanging, and I'm not sure you can keep all your material, but also just positionally. Two bishops are just so mighty in this position. And the typical white pawn majority on the king side has really been neutralized by this pawn on h4, holding up two white pawns on h3 and g2. So I believe Levon Aronian is doing well here. He might be looking for his, I hope that's correct, his first win of the wrapped portion of the tournament. Things didn't start out so well for him after he lost to Vishy Anand in 19 moves. He resigned to avoid getting checkmated on move 20 in the first round. So he's trying to find his way back into the tournament. Alexei Shirov, who's been doing well so far throughout the event, even though he lost a tough game with white against Hikaru Nakamura in round number 2, and had a big fight earlier today against Vishy Anand in round number 3, where the advantage, I think, changed hands a couple times. Very sharp position that ended in a draw. So I think Shirov's in trouble here after bishop takes f5. Let's see what Aronian comes up with. So far, the Berlin, as usual, is doing well. Vishy Anand has played rook to c7. No big surprises there. Tending to double rooks with rook c8. Doesn't feel like going for the crazier plan with h5, h4. And now Nakamura has to think of what he wants to do. I don't think you want to wait around for this pin to happen with rook c8. Let's say you play some innocuous move like knight to e4. Then all of a sudden after rook c8 you're losing material because your bishop is not looking forward to living long and prosper on c6. Or he might be looking forward to it, but it's not going to happen. So you gotta move it. You gotta put it, let's say, here, get it out of the way. Bishop e4. When once again the ball is in black's court, how he wants to react. Not sure if you can go rook c8, or if then you would worry about losing this pawn. Even though this pawn, not the most important pawn in the world, but you could also keep it, go h5 now. As mentioned earlier, I think Vishy is fine. I'm not sure if he's better, but I like his position. His very weird pawn structure somehow defends a lot of critical squares, gives his pieces good outposts. He does have the two bishops. I do think his opening was a success, but of course it's still a very double-edged position. And it's anything can happen Valentine's Day on this Sunday in Zurich. What's the time situation? Nakamura down to, well, Both sides more or less have the same time. Nakamura 90 minutes, Anand 20 minutes. After rook c7, Nakamura thinking here. Bishop e4 looks logical. Gotta move the bishop somewhere. Might as well put it here to keep an eye on c7, on h7. Let's see what he comes up with. There we do have Mr. Alexei Shirov also doing the Nakamura stare, but in the opposite direction. Looks like he's looking into the spectators, but I don't think he's zooming in on anybody. He's just resting his eyes somewhere. In public, is that Judith Polgar there, sitting in the first row? I believe that's Judith Polgar sitting next to Sunil Viramantri, Hikaru Nakamura's, I believe, stepfather. I'm not sure if that's the correct term. Rooting there for Hikaru, and I believe I've seen German chess legend Wolfgang Ullmann sitting in the first row there as well. We'll find out if we recognize anybody else should the cameraman slightly lift his camera again. But for now, he's zooming in on Levan Aronian, who seems, I don't know, nervous? Probably not nervous, probably excited about all his possibilities, trying to calculate the position after knight f3. If he can go bishop takes f5, which looked like a good move because of the knight e5, there's king to e6. So maybe white has to do something else, some damage control, probably rook to e3. Hoping that black would take. If black would take, all of a sudden after rook takes e4, most of white's problems would disappear. Now these pawns are a bit weak, but I do not think you should take. You can just go king e6, go out of the way. To me, it looks like black is in great shape here. Two bishops, extra pawn. Yes, we have some weaknesses, but I don't know. Might be my love for the two bishops speaking, but I do believe that black is seriously better here and that things have gone wrong for Shirov. Slightly surprised that Aronian is taking so much time before going bishop f5, because you don't want to go rook f5, since that allows knight takes e5. Can't capture that because of the pin, and if the king goes anywhere, knight takes d7, and white is at least equal, having gotten to one of the bishops. You need to get rid of those guys before they wake up. And it might be too late after bishop takes f5. Oh, maybe g4 bothers him. I just started wondering, can white do this? It probably doesn't work, but it's a tactic you always have to keep in mind when you do stuff like that. g4, hitting those two, and if black takes, knight takes g3, once again, it's a double attack against rook and bishop. I think that here it doesn't work, but it has to be calculated because of bishop c5 check, and wherever the king goes, one of the black pieces will take on h3 with check. King g2, bishop takes h3 check, for example, or king h2 or h1, rook takes h3 check. So it doesn't work, but that would be a very good line to calculate in advance. I think Kramnik once blundered a sort of similar tactic against Garry Kasparov in one of their Berlin games, and Kasparov didn't go for it, therefore Kramnik survived the game. But by now we've seen so many Berlins at the top level that in my memory they've all blurred into one like big impenetrable mess, and it's hard to point out individual games in the Berlin anymore, because it could literally be any two top players playing one of these positions. However, in this game, I don't know. I think people at the top level, they have a reason why they all start with h3 now instead of knight c3, and I believe Levan Aronian sensed that Shirov used that move order with knight c3 earlier against Kramnik, and he might repeat it, and he's hit the weak spot of it, which is his maneuver with bishop e7 and knight h4, and has therefore won the opening battle against Alexei Shirov. We'll revisit it if Levan ever makes a move. If he doesn't, we're just gonna keep ignoring it. In the Kramnik-Giri game, the position which I've been calling equal, I still think it's equal. There's some maneuvering back and forth going on, but the defining factor is still the d4 and c6 pawns are equally weak, and neither side has that much margin for maneuvering because they both have to keep watching their weaknesses. Therefore, the position strikes me as equal. Let's go back to the Nakamura-Anand game after bishop to e4. Anand did indeed go rook hc8, not worrying about the h7 pawn. So let me try to figure out what happens if you take it. First of all, it's not obvious how black recaptures queen or rook. Rook looks a tad more natural, but you need to have some sort of game plan after bishop takes h7. And here probably you can use this slight moment of white being uncoordinated with his bishop on h7 to go queen b4, take this pawn. White doesn't really want to go b3 because many bad things could happen after queen to c3 or rook to c3. This feels very, very shaky for white. And if you can't go b3, it's hard to keep that pawn. Knight b3 looks possible, but knight b3, even a5, a4. Just feels like white doesn't have time to go bishop takes h7. That's what I'm trying to say. What else can you do though? You want to take on c7. Rook takes, and if we can't take this pawn, probably a knight move, maybe knight f3. But knight f3 runs into bishop c4. Once again, there's trouble. No, this was a mistake. I need this square for my queen, because now it would have to go somewhere very, very awkward like b1, and this I don't even want to think about. It's probably nice to go here, keeping this square accessible, available. But all these positions, I prefer black. Black has the two bishops, he has this passed pawn on d4. He is active, his king is not that weak. Once again, I think it's been good opening preparation by Vishy. He surprised Nakamura with this because his line, until very recently, no one even bothered looking at it, saying, you know what, you can't play the Grunfeld a tempo down. That's insane. All these positions are sharp enough as they are. If you give white an extra move here, you're certainly in big trouble. And Vishy has challenged that assessment, I'm sure, with the help of powerful computers, and it gave him a good position out of the opening. This, of course, is a big, big game for the tournament situation. If Vishy wins this, it's going to be very hard to catch him in the overall standings. Because in the rapid section, this is game number 4 of the rapid section, every point counts double. So if you score a win, it counts as 2 points. Afterwards, they play a blitz tournament where every win only counts as 1 point. Alan currently has 5 points out of 6. After 3 rounds played, so if he were to win that one and move to 7 points, it would be a commanding lead. And of course Nakamura, who has 4 out of 6, would love to win this game and take the lead with 6 out of... I'm getting confused with the system. 6 out of 8 in front of Vishy, who would then have 5 out of 8. But right now it does not look like Nakamura has great winning chances. Once again, I'm not saying he's worse, I just feel like black's position is easier to play. It has more potential. White would love to put his knight to d3 and create some sort of blockade, but it's not going to be easy to do. He just took on c7 and Vishy has to decide how to recapture. I was looking at this rook takes c7. If bishop takes here, then queen b4 looked like great counterplay. But you could also consider queen takes c7. When after bishop takes h7, yeah, why would you do that? Take with the rook. It's nice to have the queen being able to make a little excursion to b4. And yeah, Nakamura took a long time for rook takes c7, which probably is because he doesn't really like his position and it took him a while to decide. Maybe he was also considering keeping the rook on the board, playing something like rook e1, then decided against it because these 2 rooks on the c file, too much of a force to deal with. Rook takes c7. Now Anand is going to take a moment how to recapture. I still believe rook takes c7 is the best yet, and he's done it as we can see on camera. No time for bishop h7, queen b4, and after anything else, black is okay as well. Good play by Mr. Anand, and Nakamura has played it safe, or played a solid move, played rook to d1. Which is a funny situation. Now both sides could consider taking their undefended but not overly relevant enemy's rook pawn. Bishop takes a2 is a move for black, and I don't know, we could see a line like bishop takes a2, bishop takes h7. Bishop takes a2 is normally a move you don't really want to consider because this bishop could get cut off after b3. But here I'm not so sure. Black would go rook c3 and probably this bishop would live to tell the story of how it heroically went all the way to a2, deeply into the enemy camp and snatched a pawn. It's a possible move, but possible also that Vishy is not even going to consider it in a rapid game. Why spend time on such stuff? The other move that comes to mind is the move queen to b4, just starting to target the white queen side, because white never wants to go b3, give up this square. Therefore you have to play something else, maybe knight to b3. But feels a little clumsy. Maybe I was gonna say bishop c4, but now I'm starting to worry that after queen f3 or queen f5, turning queen f5 or queen g4 might have abandoned the king a little bit too much. Poor king. So yeah, it's still an unclear position. Maybe you can go something like a5 here. I have a feeling black can never be worse. He has counterplay, but I'm not sure how much that assessment helps. It's still a very unbalanced situation. And let's look at Shirov Aronian, because there's stuff happening. Means that Aronian finally made a move. He did take on f5. Shirov reacted with a different version of that g4 trick, which I was talking about, which of course I had not even considered. He went knight takes h4. His point is after bishop takes h4, now he went g4, trying to, yeah, attack both these guys. And if this rook had to move, his plan would have worked to perfection. Let's say rook h6, rook takes f5, and white is almost winning with this strong knight and his two passed pawn. But Aronian had calculated this, probably that's why he spent all this time on bishop takes f5. Now it makes sense. And he's anticipated the move king to e7. Very nice little touch. You can't take on h5 because you don't want to give up this knight. Therefore, you have to take on f5 either with the rook or with the pawn. And after gf5, it seems like, well, the position is very double-edged. This was a fantastic idea by Shirov. This knight takes h4. But it seems like black is still very active. If he can manage to get white to move this knight, which of course is perfectly placed on e4, it feels like black should be okay. What has happened? G takes f5 has been played. Now Aronian is thinking rook d4 looks like a move. Rook g8 is also certainly a candidate, but I don't see how to proceed after king h2. So I think rook d4 is the way to go. Try to unbalance this knight. Because if white manages to consolidate here, white could very well be better. This knight does dominate the bishop in a way. But rook d4 I don't think allows that. If rook e3, worst case scenario, we take another pawn on c4. So you gotta keep white busy, but I believe he will be able to do it. We'll find out. This is sharp position as far as Berlin endgames go, and I'm gonna revisit it should it become even sharper. Much to say about the Giri, Kramnik Giri, even though Giri, what is he doing? Why did he go g5? Wow. That looks like a bit of an overreaction. The queen on f4 bothered him, so he went g5 to chase it away. But g5 really, really weakens his king and his pawn structure. So I'm very surprised to see that. Giving targets on the king side for no apparent reason. I don't know. Feels like overreacting to me. Might not be dramatic. But still, wouldn't you rather have this pawn on g6? What are you doing, Anish? Queen e3, rook c7. Queen to c3, still maneuvering back and forth, but now with added targets on the king side. Now h4 is in the air. Rook dc8 here to defend c6. It looks like Kramnik's getting somewhere. Kramnik-Giri is another matchup where Kramnik has a commanding lead in their individual encounters. I'm not sure what it is. I think it's something like 6 or 7-0 in Kramnik's favor. So yeah, Kramnik has been beating up young Anish, but young Anish, of course, keeps getting stronger and wiser, and I'm sure he's gonna be able to, at the very least, change the score to make it a little less one-sided soon. For now, yeah, I'm confused why he went g5. I don't think it's dramatic, but now I slightly prefer white. Well, if you just put this pawn back to g6, I would guess it's equal. Mr. Levon Aronian has played rook d4, chasing this knight away. Knight to c5 has been played. Now king f6 looks logical. Just blocking this f-pawn and preparing to round it up. Of course, white can start taking his own pawns, but this knight looks very far away from the action. Maybe even e4. I still like black's position, but it is very tricky to handle now for both sides. Nakamura Anand. Let's see what's happening there. not sure. Anand played queen to c5, not queen to b4. It's nice to take the 5th rank under control. Maybe he wants queen h5, sets a little trap. I believe that's his main point. Bishop takes h7, runs into queen h5 with a double attack. But of course, that's not going to work against Nakamura. He's just challenging Nakamura to come up with a good move. Knight f3, for example, would run into f5 now, since the queen controls the 5th rank and this bishop is more or less trapped. Could go here, but doesn't want to go there. Anand, I think, yeah, should stop saying I think. Everything I say is what I think, and I don't think much before saying it. Anand, I think, is okay. Knight b3 looks like an obvious move, which you don't want to take once again. Opposite color bishops, now you're worse because your king becomes a little weak around the light squares, but you can just more or less ignore it. Go queen to e5 and hang on, let me figure this out. Why can't we take? That's what I'm trying to figure out, but I think I figured it out. Takes, rook to d7, and the point is queen takes e5, runs into a little Zwischenschach, as we say in Germany. King g2, f takes e5 with an extra rook. Knight b3 is on the board, so this might very well happen. Well, probably not the part where Nakamura blunders his rook, but the line is still relevant. Queen e5, and you can't take here. First, I thought rook d7, but that would be a bit of a mistake because knight takes e6 is check. So what you gotta do is go bishop d4, queen d4, and now rook d7, and white can't defend all his pieces. Queen e5, rook d1 is check, and queen a4, just rook d1, queen d1, and queen takes e4, winning. Actually, if you want to show off, you can take here immediately, but that's only if you really want to show off. And now go bishop to d5, winning the queen. It's pinned. So Nakamura cannot really take on d4. He has to come up with something else. Should Vishy play queen e5? And I'm not sure what that something else is. Bishop h7 still off the table. After f5, this bishop is trapped by Her Majesty herself. f5 is a move you don't want to play. Just out of general aesthetic considerations, it opens up this diagonal where your king is. Queen h5, and you can never really take on d4 because you're not gonna survive this pin. I'm not sure what the quickest punishment here is. Rook d7 looks good enough, and just picking up material. So you can't go f4, you can't take on h7, you can't take on d4. You need to find a good move. It's not obvious to me what that is, but Nakamura has quickly played knight to d2 back. He's understood he can't grab anything, and now he wants to regroup his knight to f3. Vishy could offer a move repetition by going queen to c5 if he were so inclined. Asking Nakamura, are you okay with a draw or do you want to keep playing for a win because of the tournament situation? And of course Vishy could also play for a win himself by pretty much making any other move. Queen h5, for example, looks like a good move, targeting this rook on d1. Vishy doing well, which, yeah, must feel great for him and his many supporters after the horrible tournament he's had in Gibraltar. It's the usual roller coaster ride with people yelling after one tournament, no, Vishy's lost it, he can't play anymore, and then realizing in his next tournament, oh, he can actually still play even with the best of the best. And it's going to be very exciting to see which Vishy it's going to be in the candidates, which he's won last year. Not that long ago, just 1 year ago, he destroyed the field in the candidates tournament and qualified for a match against Vishy Anand. He's not the only candidate playing in Zurich. There is also Hikaru Nakamura. In his first candidates tournament, he's gonna be highly motivated to qualify for a match against Magnus, even though his score against Magnus is not the best. Anish Giri also participating in the candidates tournament, also his first candidates tournament. The 21-year-old, one of the most solid players around. He might be happy that Vladimir Kramnik is not playing in that candidates tournament. Kramnik's sort of the odd man out. The wildcard went to Raonian. The rating list, the rating qualifiers were picked at a point when he did not make it, and Giri and Topalov got the rating spots on average. Kramnik did not participate in the Grand Prix. He did not manage to qualify from the World Cup, so he's not playing in the candidates tournament. But Levan Aronian, who we see on screen there, is, because the organizers organize a tournament in Moscow, but as far as I understand, there's an Armenian businessman or an Armenian group behind it, and they chose the Armenian star Levan Aronian to play in that tournament. Of course, very worthy participant as well. Levan Aronian is trying to win this position against Alexei Shirov. It's a strange position because structurally it looks like black is in trouble, but I believe black's activity and the weakness of the white king play a bigger role here than the structure, where you think if the knight gets to e4, white is going to have a nice structure. But in this position, it feels like what matters is really the activity of the rooks. And even this passed pawn could potentially become dangerous. So I believe it's Shirov trying to survive this position and Aronian the one putting pressure. But we shall see. What's going on in the Vichy game? He's played f5 after knight d2. Probably just so he doesn't ever have to worry about bishop takes h7 again. Bishop g2, and now he's gone to c5. Maybe after knight b3, his idea is also that he can now play queen c2, since this bishop no longer patrols this long diagonal. I should stop calling not that long diagonals. Because even though this one is long, it's not as long as h1 a8, which is the real long diagonal. It's probably the second longest diagonal, but the bishop no longer controls it, and it doesn't control the c2 square in particular. And that is the square that Anand has set his eyes on. He wants to go queen c2. Eliminating any risk, because in the endgame you really can never be worse, and you can very well be better. Very good game by Vichy Anand so far. What we got on camera, that's Shirov's blue shirt against Levan Aronian's black rook on b2. If in doubt, grab pawns. Aronian took on b2, rook to d3, trying to orchestrate some counterplay by going rook to d7 check. What do you do about it? Do you ignore it? I guess you might have to ignore it, because I can't see a way to stop that check. So you better hope it's not that dangerous. One thing you don't want to do is go king f6, because then this knight occupies its ideal square with check. That is not the best of ideas. Or you could even do even worse. I'm an expert in finding self-mates. Here we played b6. That is the end. And you don't want that fate to happen to the black king. Could also reverse the order. Could go b6. That's probably a bad idea, because now after rook d7, you don't go king f6, knight e4 mate. And so you go king e8, and this knight on c5 is under attack, making life miserable for white. Actually, white is just lost here. After b6, rook d7 check is not an option. White would have to go knight e4, come back to his rightful square. When black is probably better, but as long as the white pieces are as well coordinated, there is always going to be some counterplay. And you have to be very cautious. I'm thinking, which means I'm counting pawns. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against 1, 2, 3, 4. So black's material advantage is not all that drastic yet. Still more about activity, and it's far from obvious to me how you want to play this with black. b6 looks logical, but after knight e4 I fail to spot an easy plan. You can make some more moves. Knight e4, let's say we stay greedy, take on a2, then f6 check. It's a bit of an issue. This passed pawn becomes too strong. If you go rook e2 to take this knight, this looks logical. Once again f6, if king e6, f7. fast runner, that dude. Maybe black is still okay here, rook h8, but nothing clear-cut. And time is ticking away. Aronian down to 9 minutes, Shirov down to 11 minutes. It's gonna be very complicated. And we have developments in the Nakamura-Anand game. Slightly strange developments. Or are they? Queen c5, b3 has been played. Anand played queen c2, that was his plan. And Nakamura decided to bail out. I think good choice actually, with knight to c4. Understanding he's not better. Queen takes d3, rook takes d3, bishop takes c4, b takes c4, rook takes c4. Now, black is a pawn up, but because of his crippled pawn structure, I don't think you have any realistic winning chances. Which might sound strange, because in the third round of the day I was talking about Levan Aronian having great winning chances in a similar position with equal material. But here I really don't think there is much to do, because white will easily maintain a blockade on the light squares. Let's say whatever, king f6. Put the bishop here, put the king on f3, and I think it's just a draw. So once again, very good pragmatic decision by Hikaru Nakamura. He understood his position wasn't better and he should not step outside of the boundaries of correct play and try to simplify it to an endgame where he's slightly worse, but that can certainly be held. Another option here is rook c3, but I believe you can just take and go bishop to b3. Yeah, this is just a draw. White hasn't time to put his king on e2. Keep this pawn in check. No, it's just a draw. Good defense by Nakamura. What's going on in the Giri game? Is Giri getting checkmated after his earlier sins? Giri really struggles against Kramnik. He always does. This g5 move is just so strange to me. Queen d6, bishop b1, and Kramnik starting to use it by going for that little square. Once again, imagine a pawn on g6. No such worries. King f8, but it's not really the time for the king to step into the center of the battle. This is really not a King Theoden situation yet. King f8, queen c2, king e7, rook e1. He's being happily welcomed by white rook along the e-file. King to f8 back, and d5 looks like he's just getting crushed. d5 opening the floodgates. If you go e takes d5, it's checkmate in a couple moves. Don't want that. And if you go e5, he's played e5, but just looks like a horrible position. I'm not sure if d takes c6 is best. Probably not, because then black at least can exchange some material. Maybe just penetrate, queen h7. Amongst other things, you might be threatening queen takes g7, followed by bishop takes e5. Black can't free himself by cd5 because his bishop drops. No, things have gone terribly wrong for Anish Giri. And once again, I believe the main culprit and where his worries start is the move g5. Why would you weaken your poor king like that, Anish? Thought you were a cautious dude. I'm sure there's a good reason which I'm missing right now, but yet to me this move just looks so strange. If you want to move one of these pawns, move the h pawn, but not the g pawn. It's so confusing. Let's see what Kramnik does. I'm gonna stick around here for a moment. It looks like the Vichy game has ended in a draw. Rook c3, he's offered a draw. He understands that Nakamura is gonna take and go bishop b3 and not gonna lose. Which is alright for Vichy, considering the tournament situation. He keeps his lead. He is now on... so complicated. 3 out of 4, which makes it 6 out of 8. It's probably not that complicated. 3 out of 4 times 2, 6 out of 8. While Nakamura stays 1 point or half a point, that's what confused me, behind on 5 out of 8 or 2.5 out of 4. Still, there is play to come. There's still 7 points to be gained or lost. 1 more rapid game worth 2 points in round number 5 tomorrow, and 5 blitz games worth 1 point each. I'll be back here tomorrow with my colleague Fiona Steele-Anthony, who's going to return from, I believe, London. I believe she was playing or coaching in the 4NCL, the British League. But tomorrow I'll have some company, so it's not just me talking to myself and wondering if anybody can see me out there or if I'm going nuts. Because let's face it, I think I'm doing chess commentary, but there is a fairly good chance in reality I am in some mental home talking to the wall, or like maybe I think I have a computer. I'm just sitting there with dressing up and saying, no, I'm doing chess commentary, talking about top chess tournaments. A lot of people listening to me, tens of people on this Valentine's Day are taking the time to say, you know what, no romantic dinner. Let's watch Jan Gustafsson doing commentary on the Zurich Chess Challenge. Doesn't that sound like a plan? And there is still a lot of commentary to be done on the Zurich Chess Challenge. Not only is tomorrow left, today is far from finished. Levan Aronian, I believe, has managed to keep control. He's kind of good at this stuff. He's come up with a move bishop f6, allowing the check on d7, saying, you know what, you can give one check, I don't care, I'll go king e8, and then your pawn on h3 is gonna hang, and I'll be threatening b6 to distract the defender of your rookie rook on d7. So Shirov probably wisely decided not to give that check, went knight e4, but now rook h4, once again, bothering this knight on his blockading square, blockading assignment on e4. It looks like white just can't control everything. Rook e1 is the move you want to play, but then you have no threats. You could just take another pawn. No, Levan Aronian, another masterclass of how to play the Berlin. The problem is how to play the Berlin is a thing really only players with like 27, 80 plus should even try to understand. So it's going to be sort of a small class when Levan gives his lecture, but if you can master it, it certainly helps. I'm trying to think of another move here. Could go back to c5, but we've already established rook d7 is not much of a threat and probably like just keep eating pawns. Knight takes f6 looks terrible as well. Now after king f6, the only plus that white had, his nice knight against the baddish bishop, has disappeared. I think black is just winning. Maybe that is the verdict. Black is just winning, period. No matter what you do. Not a good day at the Berlin office for Alexei Shirov. Oh, and Fiona's in the chat. She might still be stuck in London. And yeah, she's calling my commentary brilliant. She is trying to create a good mood for tomorrow. No need, Fiona. No need for praise. I kind of know I'm talking nonsense most of the time, and I'll be happy to share the talking duties tomorrow. In my style, when I say sharing, I say I'm going to do 92% of the talking and then look for approval, the 8% where I'm not talking. So looking forward to the show with Fiona tomorrow. And for now, I'm looking forward to, I don't know if I'm looking forward to Anish Giri getting checkmated. I think it's going to happen, but I tend to root for Anish. I quite like the guy, even though he does not have the best reputation in the world. A lot of people say he's too boring, he draws too many games. And I think there is some truth that he has, I don't know how you call it, an objective style, or that he doesn't like to take chances as much as some of the others. But I don't think, first of all, I don't think his draw percentage is much higher than other players. And personally, I think his style is interesting because I'm a theory nerd. And when it comes to like chess openings, studying what Giri does is very high on my list. Giri and Wojtaszek are the two guys you always want to follow, always have ideas, play all the lines. So I like following him, but I also like following Kramnik. Kramnik was my hero growing up. Studied all his games starting from the mid-90s when he started destroying people in that Moscow Olympiad. When was it, 94? Probably 94. And he hasn't lost a step, Vladimir Kramnik. Let's not forget, he's the number 2 in the world at his very advanced age, 40 years old. I can say that because I'm not that much younger. That's my main claim to fame as a chess player. My birthday is on the same day as Vladimir Kramnik's, 25th of June. But he is 4 years older. He's 75, I'm 79. But I always get upset when I go on a chess website on my birthday and it says, today's birthday is Vladimir Kramnik. That one I can live with, but then they list like 3 other guys and never list me. It's very upsetting. Living in the birthday shadow of Vladimir Kramnik. And Anish Giri also is living in the shadow of Vladimir Kramnik because he keeps getting crushed by the guy. Today, no exception. Queen to f5, bishop g7. It's just a horrible position. I don't even know what the best way to finish off is. Rook e1 looks good enough. Just target that dude. Sooner or later, something's gonna give. There's just too many weaknesses. And Anish, what did we learn about moving pawns in front of our king? Already here, h6. Not so sure you really had to do that. But okay, this one I wasn't even gonna mention. I'll forgive you. Queen f4, queen d7, bishop f3. But g5? Are you serious? g5? Exposing this diagonal. And look what you've done. Now we fast forward 30 moves. Queen sitting on f5. Imagine a nice little pawn here on g6. None of this would have happened. No, I think he's gonna get crushed. Oh, we have some more moves. Kramnik didn't play rook e1. He went dc6, which also looks pretty good. Bishop c6, queen to c2, overloading the c file, threatening b5. Is this resigns or is there some tricks? You can try rook d8, for example. If rook c6 takes. There is rook d1 check and you get the bishop back. But probably... White will not do that, but do something better. For example, move this bishop and then take. No, Giri's position is just horrible. And yeah, sometimes these things happen. You just keep getting crushed by one guy, especially a guy who's older than you and has been around Kramnik almost twice Giri's age, and he's been destroying him every game they have played. Well, every game is not true, but he has a commanding score. And probably this will change, or maybe this will change if Giri beats him once, but for now, looks like he has a bit of a Kramnik complex. Giri, one of the few guys who doesn't have a Carlsen complex, has a +1 score against Magnus Carlsen. As he might have mentioned once or twice, he's not the type to brag, but I believe mentioning that particular record every once in a while is something that he doesn't shy away from. And yeah, Magnus, of course, is bothered by that, but what can he do? He has never defeated excellent English, defeated Anish Giri. No such problems for Vladimir Kramnik, who can count more than one victory over the talented Dutchman. Should I call him talented? Does that sound condescending for like a 2800 player? I guess it sounds a little offensive. Against the Dutch world-class player. Keeps getting crushed by Vladi though. Queen e6. What's his point? b5, bishop e4 or stuff like that? Yeah, that's the trick. b5, bishop e4, queen e4, rook c5. And all of a sudden black would beat material up. I have a feeling Mr. Kramnik is gonna spot that. What's he gonna do though? Queen c3 to avoid it? Or are we getting checkmated? Maybe Giri is gonna pull off a last minute counter checkmate here. He might still be lost though if Kramnik spots that f3. No, threatens b5. Let's see what he's done. He's gone back to f5 with the queen. Doesn't want any funny business. And he's spotted that Giri can't exchange queens because he still loses material on the c file. Another good mature decision by Big Vlad. We need better nicknames for these guys, like very hard. Big Vlad is not that great a name. The Tiger from Madras we also can't really do, since Madras is no longer the name of the city. Levan Aronian, I don't know. I used to call him Patsule, but he didn't like that because he likes calling other people Patsule. And it felt a bit strange to call someone who's so much better at chess than me Patsule anyway. So nowadays I call him Dr. Levon. I think he likes that better because he's culture guy, so he likes the doctor title. But even that nickname could be improved. Anish, I'm also not sure what to call him. Thing is, Anish is sort of an interesting first name, so you don't need a nickname that badly. But we would still Neat one. I liked the artist earlier, which is a bit offensive, but I like the explanation because he likes to draw. I don't agree with the premise as mentioned, but it was clever. And Nakamura, I'm also not sure if he does have a nickname. It's also a good name, Hikaru Nakamura. You don't really need a nickname then. Sounds like Hero Nakamura from Heroes. But yeah, we need more nicknames in chess. And yeah, Kramnik, I think Kramnik is way past the Drawnik phase. Let's not forget, at some point people were saying Kramnik is boring and he draws too many games. Called him Drawnik. He's one of the most exciting players around now that he's older and doesn't care anymore. And more importantly, does not have to prepare for World Championship matches every other year. He's playing very exciting, free-spirited chess. But yeah, Kramnik has gone through what Leiko's also gone through, that's why I thought of him. What Giri is going through now, being called the most boring chess player in the history of chess. Which must be kind of tough. You're like 21-year-old, you've worked very hard, you've reached 2800 at that age, and then all the people do once you reach that level say, nah, you're boring, you don't have the strength of character to be really good. You're only 2800 at age 21. Like, how are you ever gonna amount to anything without any fighting spirit? I don't know, it's puzzling to me. But what is true is that Giri does not have a great tournament and he's gonna get crushed by Vladi here. Bishop a2, threatening, rook takes c6, followed by queen f7, which is a bit of a problem. Actually, you can defend. Bishop e8, maybe things aren't as one-sided as I made them, because bishop e8 covers this, and magically you've managed to unpin. There he goes. Oh, comeback by Giri. Maybe he needed my little pep talk. What's going on, Bishop? Kramnik, without thinking, has given up his queen on c8. Interesting decision. Probably a good decision, but I'd be nervous to give up my queen. I don't know. White still has to be better, but it's not like this, okay, I'm gonna checkmate you with all my pieces and you're also pinned and can't move a thing anymore. Now it's two rooks against the queen, and white is probably still much better because of his passed pawn, but it's an unbalanced material situation and stuff could happen. Queen d2, both players also very low on time, or down to 2 minutes. Queen d2, a move the computer does not approve of, but such positions should not be played against computers. Computer points out, however, that rook c7 is a pretty good idea. Intending queen b2, rook takes f7, king g8, rook takes e8, king h7, and now to checkmate on all these weakened light squares. Which, yeah, is actually not outside the realm of Kramnik calculating power. To go rook c7, rook f7, he could very well come up with. You have to calculate that there's no perpetual here, which is what scares me more. But I think he can do that as well. Check, king e2, queen e4. Sometimes you just don't start calculating such lines with little time, because who has the time to make sure there's no more checks? However, after king d2, there's no more checks, and he's done it. He's played king to rook to c7. And it looks like Kramnik, after letting go of his iron grip a little bit for a while, thanks to Giri playing queen to d2, which was a mistake, is now back in the driver's seat. No, he was always in the driver's seat. That's not a good analogy. I have to work on my analogies. Back on top? Nah, also no good. I don't know. e4 was a bad chance apparently, but good luck spotting that with 2 minutes on the clock. Rook e8, queen d2. And I didn't spot that because I'm God's gift to chess, but because I have an engine running to figure out what has actually happened in this game. This would have, kept the outcome unknown. Now after rook c7, the game is over, and kudos to Kramnik for very quickly calculating this. It's queen e1, queen e4. It's not a perpetual. I think Giri missed rook c7. Let's do a little of our body language doctor expertise. no time to read the body language. Giri is just concentrated because he's low on time. He's calculating queen e1 followed by queen e4 or queen takes b2 followed by king g8. Probably will come to the conclusion that neither is very good and then play queen takes b2. And yet there we've seen a slightly resigned look up, like, ugh, why did I blunder this? Just when I thought I was out, they pull me back in. Shirov is in big trouble. I'm going to get to his game in a minute after I stopped staring at Anish Giri. Oh no, now I can't stare at Anish anymore. The cameraman left him. And yeah, he's played queen takes b2 though. Queen b2, rook f7, king g8, which is the best chance, so he had to go for this. But it's not much fun. Not only is he material down, he's also positionally worse, because this is a big, big threat. And yeah, you just can't defend everything here. Queen d4, rook d7, threatening this. No, this game will be over soon. The game that is already over is Alexei Shirov against Levon Aronian. Aronian, also a guy who has a tremendous score against Alexei Shirov, adds to that score in rapid games by winning on the black side of a Berlin. Was a very strange position where it always felt like optically white must be in good shape. Good knight against bishop, this passed pawn. Aronian managed to show that the activity, especially of his rooks, was more important here. He decided to ignore this rook d7 check threat, rightly so, wasn't a threat, and picked up some more pawns, and at some point, even though you have a nice centralized knight, it does matter that you're losing all the pawns. And therefore Shirov decided to force the issue with rook a6, but that allows bishop h4, and now maintaining the blockade comes at a steep price because it allows checkmate, which last time I checked ends the game. So instead f6, king f7 was thrown in, but still the same problem. You can't go here. If you go anywhere else, your knight gets captured. Therefore Shirov resigned, and so did Anish Giri after bishop to d5. Too many threats. Bishop e4, as mentioned, queen d4, d7 is a pretty thankless endeavor as well. So Vladimir Kramnik keeps beasting against Anish Giri, and we see that the strength in these matchups, or the previous results in these matchups, still show Alexei Shirov always has a very tough time against Levon Aronian. No exception today, he lost. Vladimir Kramnik just loves playing against Anish Giri. Always, not always, but yeah, it's a tremendous score. Adds to that by winning this game. And Hikaru Nakamura, who normally has a great score against Vishy Anand, but this time he's meeting Zurich Vishy Anand. Vishy Anand in great shape, putting some pressure even with the black pieces. Sharp opening preparation. Goes for this Grunfeld reverse, which until very recently was not considered playable opening. But Vishy's done his homework, got a good position, and never got into any trouble. Made a draw from the position of strength. Vishy maintains the lead in the tournament. That continues tomorrow at 3 p.m. with the final rapid game, and then at 6 p.m. with the Blitz tournament that consists of 5 rounds. Every game in the Blitz tournament is worth 1 point. Every game in the rapid tournament worth 2 points. Stay tuned. Let's see if Vishy Anand can win his first tournament of the year and make all of us forget what happened in Gibraltar. What happens in Gibraltar stays in Gibraltar, they say, but I'm not sure that's true in the social media age. Thank you guys for watching. Excuse the technical hiccups we had earlier. I hope you enjoyed the show, and I'll be back tomorrow together with Fiona Steele-Antony to talk you through all the action. If you want to see player interviews, your best chance is to click on the German flag and hope that one of the players decides to join the German broadcast, which is live on site in Zurich, and give his expert opinions. I'll be back from Hamburg, from our studio tomorrow, while Anish and Vladimir are still enjoying a friendly analysis. Thanks for watching. Happy Valentine's Day. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.